So a little bit of housekeeping. Just want to remind everybody that you're going to continue to use your People's Choice Classic program like you've have been using. And the only thing, I mentioned it in one of the emails that went out, that any of the payroll that you do in October, each pay run you do, try to enter them in alphabetical order by last name, and that'll simplify the assigning of check numbers. Once you go live, that's no big deal, but because it's going to automatically calculate by last name when you're processing the checks, and you'll understand that a little bit more. There will be a request form. There is a technical request form that's in the People's Choice accounting program, but there's going to be a special request form just for the members of this class, and it will give you the options to submit questions. Like maybe you're playing with the program between classes each week, and you want to make sure a certain question gets answered. You can submit it, and we'll make sure that gets to be part of the agenda. Or if you have any problems with the installation or some error comes up for whatever reason, you can let us know that. Each of you did get some one-on-one personal support. You basically got 30 minutes with the early bird tax update, and then you got another 60 minutes for purchasing the conversion training upgrade. So you have a good number of minutes, and I just encourage you to save that for when you really need that one-on-one help. And then if you have any new ideas and things as we go through the course, you can go ahead and submit requests for how to enhance a feature or add a feature that maybe you're not seeing, or maybe if you suggest it, we can say, oh, we already have that. So that's what that request form will be for. There was a little delay in getting the install email out for downloading and install, so some of you haven't had a chance to install it yet. We're going to go ahead and go through the process of logging onto the customer portal, downloading it, installing it, and getting it to the stage where you can start practicing your entries with the things that we covered today. Some of you I know have more than one company to convert. We're asking, there will be an extra charge for the other companies, but we'd rather you wait and just do this one company now. And then once you go live with this particular company, then you can explore going ahead and adding companies with your standard license for the PCA desktop. You have up to 5 companies that you can manage within the program. So what we'll be covering today, like I mentioned earlier, we're going to download and install the special version for this class. And then I'm going to give an overview of the program and do a basic check entry, deposit, and we'll process a payroll. But you'll also be showing where you can go to get some individual tips in the manual and on the customer hub. When we go to download, I'll also show you that. There are certain tasks that we want you to complete in People's Choice Classic before you make a backup to upload and install for us to convert. So we'll have that list for you. And then once we do convert your data, there's reports that you're going to want to print in both programs to make sure that the data is converted properly and that everything's in sync, so that for instance, the bank balance in People's Choice Classic is the same bank balance that you have after conversion. So we know everything is in sync before you start entering any transactions. And then there'll be a question and answer. So what we're going to go ahead and do now is to log on to the customer portal. I'm going to go ahead and download and install the program. And it's like some of you have already done this, but then we'll, from there, we'll take it and we'll do another entry in transactions and so forth. So I'm going to go and switch over to my, if you can't remember where to go to log on to the portal, you can just log on to the website and go to portal and log on there. Otherwise, I already have it loaded here with my email address and my password. And so I'm going to click login. And this is at that safechoice.customerhub.net. That's where the login. So you'll be taken to this screen. And before I go into where we do the download, here's where you can go and get some information. There are a couple of videos you might want to watch if you haven't watched them already. There's this that shows the difference between Basic and Premier. And there's an overview, which we'll be doing some of that today. And then there was some videos that were made that some of you can go ahead and click on these and you'll be able to, they were sent in advance, so but you still have access to them. But the other thing is, as you dive into things, if you go to the Help Center and you go to the how-tos in accounting, you'll have a list of various functions that can be done. So for instance, there's the check printing, and it's just a video that will take you through the check printing. We'll be doing some basic of that, but there's a number of things that you can go on your own, logging into the customer portal and see the how-tos. There's also how you can, I'll show you how to access the manual once you have the program downloaded and installed. So you'll be able to use this as a reference center. And this is also where you're going to go to upload your backup to be converted. And so once you're logged in, you can go up here and go to the file box. And in the file box is where this program, that special program, is to be downloaded. I'm going to click download. And it's downloading to, I'm going to do it to the download folder. So as it's downloading, this is also where you're going to go when you have your backup ready to upload. You'll come here and you'll click on upload file, and that'll give you the option to browse and find your backup file and upload it. And once it is uploaded, you we will be notified, and we know that the file is up there, and we'll get in touch if there's some problems with your data, or and we'll be in touch one-on-one if we have some problems as we're trying to convert your data. So having done the download, I'm going to go to my download folder, and here's the file that we're going to run. So I'm going to go live on this. I had uninstalled it on my computer, so you might get this message. If you do, you click more info, and it should give you the name of the file and the publisher, and you can click run anyway. I helped someone earlier this week. Their antivirus program had them run through some things. So it's possible you might run into some obstacles, and we can help you out if you do have an obstacle getting the program installed. So it's going to open up here to sure we got. So I think you should be able to see this. I know on some things, but it's a user account control. And once it starts the People's Choice Accounting desktop setup, you click yes, and then it proceeds to go into the installation. Now, People's Choice is powered by the Microsoft Office platform by Access. It does require a 32-bit version of Access. If you do not have Access 32-bit on your computer, or you have a 64-bit version, the install program will automatically install the Access 2013 runtime, which you can use to power the program. You can always switch down the road if you decide to get Microsoft Office 365. Then you can power the program with Microsoft Office 365. And there's certain things you can do that it's good to have the full version versus the runtime version. So I'm going to click OK here, and then it's going to proceed to install. I'm going to click Yes, I have read the information. It's providing the install. I have a 32-bit version, obviously, of Access on my computer, so I'm not getting the prompt that we need to install. But if it needs it, it's going to prompt you to do it, and it will download and install it for you automatically. So I'm going to have it automatically open the program, but it is also, and it's just useful to know that your password to get logged into the demo companies is user1, user1. And when we convert your data, that will also be in your converted data, but we can show you how to set up your own security system once we have your data converted. So the other thing this is going to do, it's going to bring up, where do we see? I'm going to bring this form up and basically confirming that you've run the install program. And so we're asking you to fill this out and then to check one of these boxes on how you use People's Choice Classic. This will help me a lot in terms of what to anticipate and some things we might have to deal with, particularly those of you that are using the accounts receivable. And I know there's a number of you that are using the accounts receivable and the accounting, but the front end of this class is going to be focused on the payroll, getting in sync and doing that after the fact. But we will be covering other things throughout the course of the class. So once you've submitted that, we know that you're ready to have your data converted. And we'll get back to. So it opens the program. You're going to have these three companies on your menu list. That's what makes this special from the other install program. The first one on the list is your standard People's Choice Accounting demo. I mean, feel free to go in there. The reason that we added the People's Choice Enterprise is it has accounts receivable in it. The one we used in the webinar did not have accounts receivable. It was mainly converting the payroll and the accounting. But the difference between the demo that's standard and the demo from the People's Choice Enterprises is accounts receivable is on a cash basis. And in Classic, it is on a cash basis. In the new upgraded version, you can track your accounts receivable on an accrued basis or on a cash basis. But since you're on a cash basis in Classic, it's going to get converted as cash basis. If you decide that you would like to go to an accrued accounts receivable, that can only be changed at the beginning of a calendar or fiscal year. You can't change the cash basis to accrual in mid-year. So it's something you might want to think about. One of the other things that's mentioned, that I mentioned in the webinar that promoted this particular class was for those of you who have your accountant do your payroll filings, you maybe print out reports. We are offering a special accountant's copy for those, for your accountant, and we have a registration form that you can fill out who your accountant is. You want to give them an advance notice because they will have to opt in. So their invitation to get the free program, they know it isn't spam, and they'll have to opt in to be able to proceed to get the download. But then you'd be able to make a backup and give to your accountant, and they could restore it into this accountant's copy, and they could do the payroll report filings for you if that's how you're working with your accountant right now, as well as coordinating if you're doing if you're running the accounting module. They're probably helping you with doing the journal entries, and so having the accountant's copy available is something to keep in mind. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go ahead and go into the program. I'm just going to go into our one that we used for the class. You are going to get this until we send you an activation file, which we will do sometime in October, which will be the full free year license that was promoted in the upgrade. But right now you have every feature. It's available in the standard program. You'll get this message until we get you activated. So it's going to go ahead and connect to that particular company. And like I mentioned a little bit earlier, you will have the ability to track up to 5 companies. If many people I know track their personal books in People's Choice Classic as well as their business. And I know many of you have multiple businesses, and we have a couple of accountants I know in our group here, and they probably have multiple companies that they're tracking payroll or doing the accounting for with the Classic program, and possibly will be wanting to do the conversion. Like I said, we may have some special sessions that we set up specifically for accountants and for those who are using accounts receivable, because I know there's some of you who don't use accounts receivable, and so it's possible we may have a special class, or we'll just announce in advance that that's what we're going to cover at a particular class, and if it doesn't apply to you, you could just skip that particular class. So I'm going to use the user one, tab user one, to get into this company. And we have 2 different menus available. Although you use what's called the People's Choice Classic, I often refer to the People's Choice XP Classic menu, which is this menu that you're seeing right here. But many people prefer using the download menus. Let me just move this here so I can see. So for instance, I'm on sales here. Well, I can go up to sales here, and I go to quotations, sales orders, etc. Exact same thing. If I go to sales here, I go to quotations, sales order, invoices. Again, this particular menu only applies to those who are using accounts receivable. This purchases menu is only for accounts payable or your inventory. You didn't have this particular, you had unpaid bills in People's Choice Classic, but this would be a full accounts payable system. But I know a lot of you are going to just get the basic accounting and won't have these 2 items on the menu. You'll just have the bank accounts. If you want to, and if you're not ever going to use the sales and purchases in your setup, you do have the option, especially when you get your company converted, it's going to still restore as Premier, but you can come down here and change it to basic. And I'm not going to do it right now, but so I'm going to leave it on Premier. But it can have a basic menu, so even those that need the Premier for accounts receivable, if they have their a second company that's just for their personal books, more than likely they just want to use the basic menu and not have the sales and things kind of clutter up the screen, so to speak, on something that you never use. So also, while just other navigation things, if you go up, click on the help up here, you can pull up the user's manual. I'm not a big fan of user's manual. I find them confusing, but it does provide you with all the information from setup and so forth. What's a little different about what we're doing here is typically somebody starting a People's Choice, they're starting from scratch and creating new data files and going through the various setup requirements for financial periods and setting up the bank and blah, blah, blah. But in our case, everything's going to be converted and set up for you at that point. And what we'll cover in later classes is taking advantage of the features that you didn't have available in People's Choice Classic, such in the payroll. You didn't have the ability to track employee benefits, which you do in our payroll, or you didn't have the ability to do a direct deposit that you can upload to your bank, which you can do in here. But we'll cover those things later on. The main objective in October is to get the data converted and get you entering in information after the fact so that you can keep it in sync. So what you'll be doing, we'll look at the payroll, I'll look at the basic transactions. So everybody will probably be entering in checks. We may have a couple of people that only use payroll for payroll and they don't even keep track of their bank balance. But most of you I know do. And so you'll go into banking. And so here's just a quick look at like entering in checks. And as I mentioned in the customer portal, there's some individual longer videos on really going into more detail. And the banking journals, you can actually enter in your checks and deposits here. But I like to show this screen simply because it shows the bank balance up in the upper right-hand corner like it does in your People's Choice Classic. And it's a format that people like, and you can scroll through the different ones and you can see the distribution of each check, just like you're able to do in your classic program. But most of your check entry, I would suggest that you just do it from checks. And when you convert the data, all your checks that are in classic are going to be showing up here. And so you can go in here and you can pull up any of these particular checks and view them. If it's just a regular check, I mean, if you want to create I'll just create a new check here. We click new. So when we click new, we're doing it for this bank. Now, if we wanted to switch banks, I don't know how many you have more than that. I'll just delete this. But before you go into here, you can, if there's only one bank account here, but if you had multiple bank accounts, you would select that bank account here. And then, so you can have as many bank accounts as you want, similar to what you have here. But otherwise, yeah, you'll go into here. And if you're going to enter in a new check, you would just click new. And there's 3 different types of check numbers. You have computer checks, manual checks, and other. You didn't have an other check number option in the People's Choice Classic. We use this for online transaction, or many of you use debit cards, and there's no check number per se on it, but it is a banking transaction, so we use other. So the other one is good category for the internet banking and generating debit cards. We have had some people actually set up a bank account for their credit cards and keep a negative bank balance, but then you enter in the transaction of the credit card just like you enter it in for a check. So some people, you are able to use an alpha check number in Classic, which you are not able to do in here. So if you've been using an alpha for like an auto withdrawal or an internet payment or tax deposit or something, we're going to convert that to an other, and there'll be a number assigned to that as you go forward. Now, you may need to resync your check numbers. It's going to in the bank account section. I'll go ahead and jump into there. In the bank account, oops. Sorry. You can track your various check numbers. So if things get out of sync and it's like, well, my next check number isn't this number, you can just come in here and fill in what the next check number should be, whether it's the computer check or a manual check. Usually you can just leave the other alone since you haven't been using that, because it's just going to assign chronologically. And this is where we'll actually go if you decide that you want to implement the MICR check printing onto blank check stock. Some of the other tips, once you get rolling, you may have a lot of checks that you duplicate a lot. So, I mean, you can go in and you can select, I'll just select that one. And it's like, well, if I'm going to purchase that again, there is the option to duplicate a check. So instead of filling everything out, you can go ahead and just duplicate a check. It'll assign the next check number. If for some reason this one's going to be a computer one versus a manual one, you could switch it to there. It has the standard distribution that you normally use. And instead of saving it like you do in Classic, you're going to click post. And when you post, that's when it's going to put it into the general ledger, or what you're used to in the receipts and disbursement recap, or it's going to post it to the general ledger if you're having your accounting module. So then you're here, if you wanted to create new and you just wanted to create a check for $50, I mean, you can change to a different date, but you can come down here. And so after conversion, this is going to be your list of places to, that your vendor list that you have. And if you have a default GL account, you're going to have the same GL account numbers in the conversion that you do in Classic. So you can just select that. It's going to fill that in and fill in the distribution for you, just like it did in Classic. So there's also, when you go to click new, or when you go into the find, there is an option for recurring. And in a later class, we will set up where if you have recurring payments, you're not using accounts payable, but you have like monthly rent. I mean, you could always use the duplicate button to keep duplicating, but you can keep a list of things that are charged automatically every month, and you can go in and process those accordingly. And we'll cover that in a later date. So that's your basic entry of a check. And so I encourage you to go ahead and when you open up your company, go into this practice company and enter in checks. And if you want to try printing checks, you can print checks. And that may, doing those things may generate some other questions for you. In terms of deposits, in the Classic program, there's a receipts journal and a batch deposit. Well, everything can be a batch deposit. When you click on deposits and you click, you can see all these have been batch deposits for this demo company. But if you go in and click new, if you're just doing a batch deposit, you can go ahead and do the however whatever amount you're wanting in there. And if it's some kind of, we'll just call it miscellaneous sales, that's a nice big miscellaneous sale, isn't it? And then if that's what it is, and that's the general ledger to go to, or if for some reason you're going to split this, you could change this to 3,000, and you could go ahead and go to some other subscription sale or whatever, how to break that down. And then that's getting posted to the general ledger. We click post. And then if you were going to itemize, and that's where the receipts journal would come into play in Classic, you would come into here and click new. And here in the deposit slip is really where the receipts journal is in this program. If you have accounts receivable, you can, the list would be there, although from accounts receivable, we're going to be doing it a little differently. But if it was just like a check from me, you can just type in the name, and you could put in the check number and the amount of the check, and we'll just say it was $50 and it was for fees. And down here you can come in and you can go ahead and distribute it to a consulting fee or something. And then if there was I'll put in my better half's name and whatever check number that was, that's $100, and it could be for fees too. The memo is not required. It's this down here that you're going to want to enter things in. And so if that's all the receipts you have, you can do that. We'll go into it at another time. If you're using accounts receivable and you've received payments, they're going to be in this window here, where these would be all your undeposited payments, and you can select from here and add them to the deposit slip. And that's be the same process that you do in Classic right now, where you go in and everything in your receipts journal has an undeposited flag on it. Well, when you click to deposit those, it basically does the same thing. So let's say that that's all we have for right now. So when we click done, it's going to go ahead and add up the receipts journal, and this is the total deposit, and these the total of the GL breakdown. And if you want, if you're going to be taking this to the bank, you can go ahead and you can include a deposit slip detail. And when you go to print that detail, it'll itemize all your checks, or if it's cash, you can list one as cash on the deposit slip. And then this is where you would go to print. Obviously, all the print previews are going to look like this. And if you're printing to here, if you wanted to go to a different printer than my default, then you can select from here to print to a PDF or some other printer that maybe you have on your system. And I'm not going to go ahead and print it. I'll just close this out. And so those are the two basic things outside of doing the payroll that I'm sure all of you are going to be doing. The bank reconciliation we can cover a little later. I mainly just want you to go in and do some practicing of entering in checks and printing checks and doing deposits, and just kind of getting familiar with navigating around the system. So, and besides the customer hub and those, you do also have this on the website. So if you went into People's Choice Accounting, there are other, it's mainly tailored to the old People's Choice XP program, but most of the functions in here are exactly the same in the current PCA desktop. And so there's a bunch of training things that you can view on this particular screen. If you need to order so you also, if you need to order forms or blank check stock, or if you decide to go there, you can click on here and that'll take you to the Choice Forms website, and you can click on checks and envelopes and so forth if you're needing the forms. So the other thing, like I mentioned earlier, we are using the company that we used on the introduction webinar where we converted a classic. So in the payroll, you can go ahead and go in and practice doing your payroll before you get your own data to practice on. We'll be working on editing checks, since you'll be entering them in after the fact. After you've got your converted data, if you go into, this is process payroll, if you go into pay run reports, every pay run you did in Classic is going to be listed here individually. So, I mean, you can go all the way back to the beginning of the year, and you can pull up that first payroll in the year. And it shows this particular one is a New Hampshire demo data, which doesn't have state income tax. So you're not seeing state tax here. For most of you, you are going to have state income tax, but this should be the exact same numbers that are in Classic for this customer with this check number. One thing I want to make sure, these are fictitious Social Security numbers. They've been changed, but you probably are going to want to go into here, and you're going to want to mask the Social Security number. So any reports you do will just show the last 4 digits of the Social Security number. If you want to have it automatically go to the process payroll screen, which we'll go to here, you can set it up in company options so that when you go into payroll, it'll go right to that screen. That's totally up to you on that, but that's where you can do some changes. And it's here where we would be setting up direct deposit if you decide you're going to implement the direct deposit. And again, that'll be covered in a later class as far as those details. But as far as a couple of items that we'll need to review in terms of your tax liabilities, we do have reports. I believe it's in general. Yes. was in liability reports. It's a special report that was made just with the for the conversion. And if you print that, like for instance, I'll do it for this year. You'll have every tax deposit check that you made in Classic listed in here. Most of these are to the Internal Revenue Service because they don't have any state, and they only pay the state unemployment once a quarter, but there's the state unemployment amounts. And so you'll have all that information that you can cross-check with your Classic program. And we'll review a little bit more on the reports you'll print in here and compare with the reports that you print in Classic as far as being in sync. But if you'll note, the one thing that we will be working through, and I mentioned a little bit on the initial webinar, is this auto correcting of the Medicare and Social Security and FUTA or SUTA, but that are based on flat percentages, not on a scale. So when you bring up a calc report, the very first one, which is the first one, let me just close this, because you'll run into something like this as well. So this was the first one. Everybody's going to complete their payroll through September before they upload their backup. You can go ahead and do a payroll in October. Don't worry about it. Ideally, do it in alphabetical order by last name, like I mentioned earlier. But that very first one that you're going to do, it's probably going to do an autocorrect. And in this particular one, Classic had actually over calculated the liability. And so the max for FUTA should be $42 on any particular employee. This one had actually calculated $56.04. And so the very first time that we did a live payroll in the system, we just let it do that autocorrect. Same thing was probably going to happen with your Social Security and Medicare tax. You'll notice that there's a difference in tax here. This is at 1336. This is 1335. Well, they did a lot of correct it because Classic does not auto-correct from pay period to pay period. And so from rounding, eventually you're a penny behind. In this particular case, by the time we did the conversion, it was 12 cents difference between the two different, between Social Security and Medicare. So the very first time that you do payroll and doing it after the fact, you'll probably need to go and edit the calculation so it matches the way it was calculated in Classic. And then once you decide to go your first payroll live, you just let it do the autocorrect. And if you have concerns about certain employees always getting the same net check at each pay period, we show you how you can edit the federal withholding so that the net check is exactly the same as it was in Classic. And then going forward, you should be fine as far as it'll calculate. And you will see over time that it'll calculate 21, 23 or something each pay period, and the next three pay periods later it may 21, 24, and it's just doing that rounding to catch up with that. So anyway, but once you're in sync and running live, you'll just go into run a payroll. You'll click next pay run. We haven't printed the checks, but we'll go ahead. It advances the pay dates. If we're on weekly, we want to include that. If you're on bi-weekly, you're going to exclude this and go in here and include that. There's a particular example where here, if you do have a different pay, it's defaulted right here. So you can have, some people have employees that are paid weekly or bi-weekly, but they may have one employee or two employees that are only paid monthly. And so in those particular cases, that's where you take advantage and say, well, here's my monthly payroll. But then when you do that, you're going to change this over here to monthly. So you can't commingle the frequencies of there. And you'll probably, that very first live payroll you do, you're going to not do the ER match because it may not be, but normally we leave that there so that we make sure that the employer share and the employee share are matched. They're also, when you're going to do at the end of the year, you're going to do a Christmas bonus or something and you don't want the deductions, you can come in here and say, don't do deductions for a particular pay run. So you're just going to do for benefits, or if you're setting up direct deposit, but you want to just cut a check, you can go in here and say, no, don't do direct deposit this time around. So there's some flexibility here on the different ways of processing. But most of the time, you're just going to be at next pay run, it'll match your pay dates. You're going to go into enter pay data, and you're going to go in and change the hours. And I'll just make this one work 20 hours this time. If they never do overtime, I mean, this is going to convert it this way. But if they never do overtime, you can just delete that from this list, because this list is going to come up the same as it was last week. So this week, this person worked 33 hours, and this person worked 38 hours. This person's salary, and so they just get the flat amount. And so these are the hours. So once we have that done, then we just go in and calculate. So instead of doing one check at a time like you do in People's Choice Classic, it calculates them all at once. So this is where it gives you the what it calculated with those hours. So you can come in here, because we haven't created the checks yet, or we haven't posted the general ledger. This is just like a preview to verify that everything got calculated correctly. And if so, then you can proceed to go ahead and create checks. If you're tracking vacation, we can cover that step in the future. If you saw that there was a mistake that maybe, oh, that was the wrong hours I put in there, you can say, I want to recalculate this. And then you can go back up to here and then Julie went or 25 hours, not 20 hours. And so you can do that. And then you would just click done and then click calculate. And then look at the calc report, and then you can see that you got the hours updated correctly for them. And otherwise, everything looks okay. Or in the case of, if you want to edit things, we don't have any deductions, but if you were going to edit deductions or edit the taxes due to the autocorrect, what we can do is we can go in here and edit results. And so you can edit the federal withholding, the Medicare that's withheld. You can edit the deductions if there were any, and you can go and edit the employer liabilities. And if you were tracking benefits, you could edit benefits. So if for some reason we wanted to change we'll just say we won't change the Social Security, but it was like calculated 0, but I'm going to go ahead and withhold $10. Then we can go ahead and withhold the $10. It'll subtract it from the net check. Like I mentioned earlier, if we were going to adjust something so that the net check was exactly like what they've been expecting to get, we can change it from penny or whatever the difference is, just so the net check is the exact same amount. So once everything's done, if you did edit deductions and you were using pre-tax deductions, or and you edited it, it is going to require you to recalculate, since the Social Security or federal or whatever was pre-exempt, it's going to recalculate. Since you changed the amount that was deducted, it's going to deduct that changed amount from the gross before it calculates the taxes. And so once you've done that and everything looks good, then you just go in and create checks, and you are given an option to make a backup. And I'll just say no to that. And most of you are probably going to have a computer check, but if for some reason it's manual, or if you do have direct deposit, you'll actually be given 2 options. And to say because you can do a mix at some employees may have a check printed, but the others are going to be in direct deposit. And so we use the other check number for the direct deposit, and the computer check, obviously, for those that are going to print and shoot computer. I'm just going to calculate those. We didn't have direct deposit. Then if you want to run reports, it's the exact same report as that calc report. The only thing that's different is here is it's assigned the check number. And that's where I was mentioning that in Classic, you should try and enter your one at a time payroll checks in alphabetical order by last name, because that's how it's going to assign it. 20207 was the first check number, but then it'll assign them accordingly. So otherwise, there are options to reprint and reassign a check number. So there's other ways if for some reason we need to adjust the check number. Again, that's kind of irrelevant as you once you go live, because we haven't created the checks before. If you're on direct deposit, then there are pay stubs that can be printed. And with the direct deposit, you can split up the net check into up to 6 bank accounts. So if you have employees that would like to have a portion of their net check put into their savings account or something like that, you can go ahead and do that, and it just will automatically deposit into their savings account as well as their checking account. But it'll itemize it on the stub along with your typical pay stub information. But again, this report that we just did right here, here's where you go ahead and print the checks. I'm not going to print the checks, but I mean, it's telling us what we're going to print. I'm going to say no right now. And then next week, or you're on bi-weekly 2 weeks from now, you click next pay run, and where you would have printed checks, so you wouldn't have got that message. It's going to advance your dates based on, if it's weekly or bi-weekly, and you go into the enter pay data, and it's the hours that we just did for the last pay period. So if you have that same type cycle every week or every 2 weeks, then the only thing you got to deal with is entering in the hours. Where it'd be a little different if you're going to track vacation pay. We can set up to there's 4. There's sick pay, vacation pay, personal pay. I mean, there's some different vacation benefit type pay that we can set up, and we can go into that again in the future. Just reminding, we want to try and make sure we're calculating everything the same in the new version, like they're doing in Classic, before we tackle any new things, whether adding new pay types, adding vacation pay types, adding direct deposit. Those we want to get set up once we know we're running smoothly going forward. So we'll be covering other things, but if you want to go into this company until we get your data converted and just do a pay run and print pay reports and print tax liability reports, I mean, there's a number of things that you can just kind of do on your own and view those items in the manual, but we'll cover these in a little bit more detail. So those are things that I encourage you to go ahead after you have installed. And like I said, this is being recorded, so you can go back and watch this and look at these. If you go into the customer hub and view some of those videos, what's nicer about those is they're typically 2 to 4 minute videos, where this particular recording, where it's going to be an hour long, and you'll be able to fast forward through it, but it's maybe going to be easier to just go into customer hub or go to the How Factory that I showed you earlier down here, and just look at how you can do some particular transactions. So that's kind of an overview, and so some of the steps of how you do some entries. So let's go ahead. We're going to advance. So we've reviewed in the demo company, and like I mentioned, you're encouraged to go ahead and play around with it. It's all demo data, and get used to navigating, and then it'll make even easier when you get your converted data, because you'll see your vendors and your employees, and it'll just make a lot more sense to you probably. As far as getting your backup to us that we would upload and convert, I showed you on when we logged into the customer portal where you can go to the file box and upload your backup. But what we want you to do before you upload the backup to us, we want you to complete all payroll transactions for September. If you reconcile the banks, it isn't absolutely necessary, but it'd be ideal for when things are in sync to make sure that when the outstanding checks are the same and so forth. If you're using the accounts receivable or you use the receipts journal, make sure all undeposited receipts have been deposited. Even in the new transactions you've done in October, go ahead and make sure that those transactions are deposited into the bank account. It's just something that's required for the conversion to make sure we just don't have any undeposited going forward. So, and I'm going to be making another video that you can watch offline, not during the class. That's going to go into showing how to print out the reports that need to be compared, and you'll be able to review that, and there'll probably be a bunch of follow-up questions next week's class regarding questions that come up as they're printing the two different reports. So once you do get your converted data, so what we're going to ask that you do is verify that everything got converted before you start entering in transactions from Classic that you've entered in on October. The basic ones in the payroll is running the W-2s as if it was the end of the year. It should come up with the same W-2 information in both systems. Then we know the taxable wages got converted correctly. And of course, verify that the withholding for federal, Social Security, Medicare, state, and for some of you, local taxes are calculated properly. And the banking, if you are using banking and reconcile, you want to make sure that the bank balance and the converted data is the same as the bank balance that you had when you made the backup. And so we can do that with the bank account activity report. Since you will have entered other checks by the time you get the converted data, you'll just want to run it through probably the end of September and make sure that the bank balance at the end of the September is the same. Or if you enter in new transactions, then you can go back and make sure that the bank balance is the same in Classic as it was after you entered in those new transactions. If you're using the accounting module, you'll want to run a trial balance on both systems to make sure the trial balance matches. And if you're using accounts receivable, you'll want to run the aging report to make sure that the open invoices are correct. That one is a little trickier because the Classic ages current 30, 60, 90, 120, and the new version is standard for current 30, 60, 90 and over. But the grand total should match up, and if it doesn't match up, then we'll give some tips to figure out which ones don't match up. You may just have to go through each customer line item and find out where it's not matching up. And there are some unique things that have taken place in Classic that can throw some things off in terms of open credit memos that maybe never got closed. And I mean, many of you I've talked to, you have Classic history going back to 1995. So you have well over 20 years worth of data. We're only going to convert 7 years of data. If you need more than 7 years, for whatever reason, it's mostly for people that have accounts receivable and they need for warranty purposes or something. They may want more, but our standard conversion is going to be 7 years. So in terms of going forward after that, I can pretty much open it up for question and answer. That's what I wanted to cover today. And I'm sure there's probably plenty of questions, so you can either send them in the chat or you can unmute yourself and just say, hey, I got a question. I must have covered it quite well if there's no questions. That will make things fast. If we can do every class and there's no question and answer, that must mean I've got everything covered for this particular class. Otherwise, if there are no other ones, I mean, the next class will be next Thursday, same time. You will be receiving a video of this. And so if you want to go back and look at some of the information regarding how we enter checks during this class, feel free to do so. I know there was some of you members that were not sure if they could attend today. They were busy or they may be in and out. And so I know there are a number of people that are wanting the recording. And if we don't have it to you by end of tomorrow, we definitely will have it to you by Monday. So if there are no other questions, I will go ahead and close the session. I'm going to make sure that I stop the video. Oops. So otherwise, if you have some follow-up questions that came after the session, go ahead and just send them to support@safechoice.com, or you can submit one of those technical request tickets that are standard, and in some of the future emails we'll have those special PCC to PCA support request tickets, as I mentioned at the beginning. So I appreciate everybody joining in, and hopefully you found this part of it valuable, and we will pick up next week. So stop recording, and I'm